The gleam of a purple heart skidded across the conveyor belt, clanging cold and unforgiving, tossed carelessly by a TSA agent's tired hand. Silence rippled through the crowded line as a proud veteran's honor was crushed in an instant. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. John Mitchell stood rigid, his jaw clenched tightly as the metallic clang echoed through the sterile airport screening area. The Purple Heart, his Purple Heart, the medal that marked the price he paid in service to his country, now lay carelessly bouncing on the conveyor belt. The worn leather case, which had protected the medal for years, was now cracked and battered, a mirror to the rough handling it had just endured. John's chest tightened with a mix of disbelief and seething anger. This was not just a medal. It was a story etched in blood and sacrifice. Every dent in that bronze heart told a tale of pain, of friends lost, of nights spent in silent agony, far from the eyes of the world. His voice cracked slightly, but the determination behind it was unmistakable. "Ma'am, that's a Purple Heart," he said, trying to inject the weight of his service into the sterile airport hum. Karen barely looked up. Her eyes flicked over him with the glazed detachment of someone exhausted beyond measure. "Rules are rules," she murmured, voice low and clipped, as if reciting a mantra to fend off the relentless stress crushing her. John's mind raced. How had it come to this? How had the very people entrusted with safeguarding passengers become so numb, so detached from the humanity in front of them? Karen wasn't a villain in the classic sense. Her hands trembled slightly as she fumbled through his belongings, her face flushed with the strain of hours on her feet, dealing with surly travelers and endless complaints. She was a product of a broken system, burdened by understaffing, minimal training, and impossible expectations. The anger swirling inside John was aimed less at her personally and more at the machine that reduced moments like his sacrifice to cold, impersonal checkpoints. Yet the sting of disrespect was undeniable. Every day since returning from deployment, John had carried the Purple Heart with quiet pride, a reminder to himself and others of the cost of freedom. Now it lay discarded like trash. The raw humiliation welled up in him, sharp and bitter. His hands clenched into fists at his sides as a crowd of onlookers began to form, a mixture of curious travelers and indifferent airport staff. Whispers began to ripple through the air, a veteran's honor disrespected in plain sight. The TSA line stretched endlessly behind John, a concrete river of hurried footsteps and muffled sighs. Karen's supervisor hovered nearby, watching but saying nothing, weighed down by his own exhaustion and the relentless pressure from above. The system demanded speed, efficiency, compliance, and left little room for empathy or understanding. Karen's indifference was a shield forged from desperation, not cruelty. John's throat tightened as he searched for words that might spark recognition, empathy, anything beyond cold bureaucracy. "This medal represents more than just metal," he said, voice gaining strength. "It's the cost of a wound I carry every day, visible or not. It deserves respect." Karen's eyes flickered for a moment, a fleeting crack in her armor before she averted her gaze. The line pressed on behind them. Impatience buzzed in the air like static. She felt trapped, cornered by impossible demands and a flood of responsibility she hadn't been fully prepared for. Her motivation was survival, not defiance. Still, the damage was done. The clash of sacrifice and procedure had erupted, a tinderbox waiting to ignite. John's mind spiraled between fury and disbelief. How could the nation that sent him to war, that honored him with a Purple Heart, allow such a blatant dismissal of his service? The anger was raw and immediate, but beneath it lay a deeper pain, the invisible scars of a soldier's life that no medal alone could express. His motivation was not revenge, but justice. He wanted the truth of his sacrifice to be seen, acknowledged, not thrown aside like discarded luggage. Around them, the tension thickened, the airport noise fading into the background as the moment crystallized into something larger. A battle not just over a medal, but over respect, dignity, and recognition in a world too often blinded by routine and bureaucracy. The anger ignited here was not merely personal. It was a spark destined to ignite a fire far beyond the confines of Terminal B. The moment the video surfaced online, a shaky, grainy clip captured by an anonymous traveler waiting behind John in the TSA line, it ignited a wildfire of emotion across the nation. The frame-by-frame replay of the Purple Heart clattering onto the conveyor belt reverberated far beyond the confines of the airport. Viewers paused, hearts sinking, as they saw the careless toss, the cold indifference etched on Karen's face as she turned away without a second glance. Within hours, the clip had amassed millions of views, shared relentlessly with captions dripping in outrage and solidarity. The internet became a vast stage where voices long silenced by bureaucracy roared back to life. Veterans poured their testimonies into comment threads and hashtags, their words woven with raw honesty and pain. They spoke of invisible wounds, of service unrecognized, of the gulf between sacrifice and public acknowledgement. "It's not just a medal," one wrote. "It's a lifetime of memories, pain, loss." Another added, "They see us as threats, not heroes. This is what happens when respect becomes optional." Civilians, too, joined the chorus, strangers who had never worn a uniform but understood the gravity of the moment. They shared stories of family members who had served, of personal sacrifices tied to military life, their empathy a powerful current running beneath the outrage. John Mitchell watched the tide swell around him with a conflicted heart. The initial shock and humiliation gave way to a profound grief, a deeper, more piercing wound inflicted not by careless hands, but by a society that so often failed to see its veterans as more than statistics or inconveniences. Every comment, every share felt like a thread pulling at the fabric of his own invisibility. Yet beneath that pain, a cautious hope stirred. For the first time since the incident, he sensed that this indignity might become a catalyst rather than a curse. Veteran advocacy groups moved swiftly, harnessing the public outrage into organized calls for accountability. Letters flooded TSA leadership, demanding acknowledgement and reform. Media outlets clamored for interviews. Spokespeople crafted statements, balancing empathy with critique. The pressure was palpable. This was no longer a private grievance, but a national reckoning. The emblem of John's sacrifice had become a symbol of systemic failure, a visible signpost demanding change. Faced with mounting scrutiny, TSA headquarters was forced to respond. The statement released was carefully worded, but unmistakably clear. An apology issued, responsibility accepted. The agency admitted the lack of adequate sensitivity training for frontline personnel, especially regarding military honors and veterans' experiences. It was a rare moment of institutional humility, a crack in the monolithic armor of bureaucracy. Karen was placed on administrative leave, pending a comprehensive retraining program, a gesture meant to demonstrate commitment to change, but one that also underscored the human toll borne by those caught in the middle. John read the apology on his phone, the words a balm, yet a reminder of the journey still ahead. It was not a cure-all, nor an erasure of the indignity suffered, but it signaled that the story had been heard. The public outcry had transformed his personal pain into a collective demand for respect, for recognition, for a reckoning with the ways in which those who serve are too often marginalized. In the quiet aftermath, John felt a fragile light flicker inside him, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this moment could redefine the conversation around veterans' dignity and treatment. The Purple Heart, once tossed and disregarded, had become a rallying point, a symbol not just of sacrifice, but of resilience. As the world watched, John understood that the path forward was still uncertain and fraught with obstacles, but the possibility of change now pulsed with undeniable urgency. The incident had shattered silence, exposed wounds, and ignited dialogue. It had unveiled the raw edges of a fractured system, and in doing so, invited the nation to confront uncomfortable truths. And for John, amidst the swirl of public emotion and official responses, the bitter sting of disrespect was slowly being tempered by the steady rise of something far more powerful: hope. John Mitchell's journey from wounded veteran to national advocate unfolded with the deliberate force of a tide reshaping the coastline, unyielding, profound, and irrevocable. The TSA's public apology, while necessary, was merely the prologue to a narrative that would redefine respect for those who serve. The spotlight that once shone harshly on a moment of careless indignity now illuminated a far larger, systemic issue: the treatment of veterans within institutions ostensibly designed for public safety, but often blind to the humanity they encountered. Congressional hearings convened swiftly, summoned by the groundswell of public demand. John found himself seated before committees composed of policymakers and military advocates, his presence alone lending weight and urgency to discussions that had, until then, been abstract or overlooked. The sterile chamber filled with echoes of his testimony, clear, measured, and unflinching, as he recounted not only the incident but the broader experience of veterans navigating airport security. His voice was a bridge between two worlds, one of sacrifice and service, the other of institutional inertia and bureaucratic oversight. He spoke of the invisible wounds that linger long after uniforms are hung up, the mental scars, the sense of invisibility, the frustration of having honor diminished to mere metal. John's narrative pierced through policy jargon and procedural defenses, humanizing an issue often reduced to statistics. The room was silent, save for the occasional murmur of acknowledgement and the steady scratch of note-taking. His testimony was not a demand for sympathy, but a call to conscience, an insistence that respect and dignity were not optional extras, but essential components of national security. Behind the scenes, the story also became one of unexpected reconciliation. Karen, the TSA agent whose careless toss had sparked the uproar, reached out to John. Their meeting was tentative but sincere, two individuals bound by an incident neither had wished to define them. Karen's apology was candid, tinged with the vulnerability of someone navigating a system that overwhelmed her. She spoke of long hours, insufficient training, and the pressure to maintain efficiency at the cost of empathy. John listened, recognizing in her struggles the cracks of a broken machine rather than malice. Forgiveness was not immediate nor facile, but John's understanding was rooted in the very ethos that had carried him through service: compassion amidst adversity. Their conversation grew into collaboration as they jointly championed reform from within the TSA ranks. Together, they advocated tirelessly for comprehensive sensitivity training that would educate agents on the profound significance of military honors and the unique challenges veterans face. They pushed for the establishment of support programs to assist veterans transitioning through security checkpoints, initiatives designed not only to educate, but to humanize the process. Months of advocacy yielded tangible results. The TSA instituted nationwide policies mandating specialized training modules focused on veteran awareness, respect for military decorations, and protocols that prioritized dignity without compromising security. Veteran liaisons were appointed at major airports, tasked with facilitating smoother experiences for service members and serving as points of contact for concerns. The agency's culture began to shift, slowly but perceptibly, as awareness permeated the ranks and compassion became integrated into operational guidelines. John's Purple Heart, once a symbol cast aside with careless abandon, transformed into a beacon of this broader movement. At a formal ceremony held at a bustling international airport, John stood with measured pride, the weight of the past carried not as a burden, but as a testament to resilience. Before a gathering of veterans, TSA officials, policymakers, and civilians, he presented Karen with a newly minted Purple Heart pin, a gesture heavy with symbolism. It was not simply a token of reconciliation, but an emblem of growth, understanding, and redemption. The pin, gleaming under the terminal lights, spoke volumes about the journey from anger and pain to healing and collaboration. That day, as cameras clicked and speeches echoed, the narrative was clear. Respect for veterans is not a passive courtesy, but an active responsibility. The story that began with a tossed medal had evolved into a legacy, one that challenged complacency, demanded systemic change, and inspired a nation to recognize honor in every line, every checkpoint, and every interaction. John's experience illuminated a fundamental truth. Honor, once diminished, can be restored through courage, empathy, and relentless advocacy. In the crowded chaos of airport security, amid the hum of scanners and the rush of travelers, a veteran's Purple Heart reclaimed its rightful place, not merely as a piece of metal, but as a symbol of enduring sacrifice and collective respect. From the depths of indignity rose a triumph that transcended one man's story, becoming a clarion call to a nation that the dignity of those who serve must never be discarded.